Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. My name is Pastor Siri. I'm a Lutheran pastor and a spiritual seeker. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about why I am an LGBTQ ally. Take a listen. So first thing I want to say is please watch the entire video. And then when you're done, if you have well-meaning and questions that come from a good place, please comment below. And I'm absolutely happy to answer questions the best I can and engage in a conversation. But any homophobic, transphobic Bible verses, you'll just be deleted because this is going to be a safe place. That being said, let's get started. So if you were by chance raised Christian or maybe in another religious belief, you might have grown up just believing it was normal and natural that the Christian faith or the Bible condemns homosexuality and is affirming of sort of a classic 1950s style family. And for a lot of us, that's exactly what we thought. But I want us to think about things a little bit differently, and I'm going to present things in a couple different ways to hopefully help you understand what I've learned and the way I see things. So first thing you should know is when I get out of bed in the morning and I get ready and I look down at my body, I feel like a woman. It's the old Shania Twain song, "Man, I feel like a woman." I do. That would make me cisgender. Because I was born in this body and I identify with it, it makes sense to me, I'm cisgendered. However, that's not true for other people. And so I learn about that. The other thing that's interesting is when I see a very attractive man and a very attractive woman walk down the street together, even though I will be able to say for sure that both of them are very attractive, I will only be attracted to the man. That's what makes me a straight woman. I have a certain identity that I live by, a certain perspective that is the norm for me. And it is arrogant to assume that I know any other lived perspective other than being a white, American, Christian, Lutheran, middle-class, cisgendered, able-bodied, straight woman. Any other perspective that differs from what I just said is something that I'm going to need to have to learn about. And that would be true for you as well. Any other perspective that you're not born into or that isn't the norm and the majority, we tend to not know about. And yet here's the thing, if you are part of the majority in any way, often we may think that our perspective and our knowledge of something is the norm, that our perspective is universal, and anyone who doesn't believe or think or act the way we do has to explain themselves rather than for us being able to listen to a different lived experience. I am ignorant of other perspectives that aren't mine, especially those that are more marginalized, and therefore I need to ask, I need to listen, and I need to learn in order to really understand. So you've heard of mansplaining, right? Mansplaining is when a man will tell a woman about something she may very well already know about, or he may re-explain to her her own life and her own beliefs. This was something that people brought to attention a few years ago, and men didn't know they were doing it, and a lot of women didn't know that men were doing it because it was so normal. And it came from this belief that we foster in our culture that men just kind of know everything and they know better. And so they felt very comfortable and natural telling women what to do and what to think, and even about their own bodies. But now we realize how ridiculous that is. Of course it's ridiculous, but there's more than just mansplaining. There's also Christiansplaining. Sometimes Christians, without being educated on a certain religion or a certain perspective or life circumstance, will assume that because they belong to the right religion, that they sort of have a perspective of the world and of other people that is not to be questioned. And it's just absolutely not true. There's also straight-splaining. Straight-splaining would be when a straight person like I, who maybe hasn't read up on anything about the LGBTQ community, just assumes that because I have a couple poorly translated verses of the Bible, that I can tell other people about their life, their perspective, and what's good for them. So we need to not do that. We need to take a moment and listen to what our neighbor has to say. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take a look very briefly at biblical passages that trip people up. But I'm not going to stay there for too long. There's really, really good books, if you're interested, that can help you with that more in depth. But let's just very briefly skim over them and why the verses you think are against the LGBTQ community really aren't. The first one people will throw around is Genesis. Basically, the passage where at the very beginning in Genesis 1, you have this beautiful account of creation that's very poetic, and then you have God created them male and female, and people are like, ha, that proves it. God only meant for there to be two genders, therefore there can't be anything else. But my friends, stop for a minute. Think about the context in which Bible verses were written. Think about the stories and the culture and what was going on. They were not having the conversations back then that we are having now, and that's not what this story was about. The story was about a God who created all living things and created order out of apparent chaos. That's what it was. It was not a dissertation on gender. And furthermore, if anything, it tells us that God created males and females together equally, that there is no sense that God favored males over females. It's a both and. God created all of these things and all of them are good. And wise people have also pointed out that there isn't binary in nature. You don't just have night and day. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, we have really long sunrises and really long sunsets that give us all sorts of different terms like dusk and dawn and twilight and all of those beautiful things that help us to see the gradual shift from one to another. Also at the Northern Hemisphere, the sun will literally seem to move across the sky and where it rises and it sets. So nothing is purely fixed. Everything is liquid and moving around and fluid and cyclical. It's very beautiful. So it's only in our own mind that we force a rigidity on nature that actually doesn't exist. Moving on to the infamous passage of Sodom and Gomorrah. And I have no idea why this ever made it into the clobber verses against gay people. Because if you actually read the story is about domination, power, sexual assault, and rape. That's what it is. And it is deeply offensive to equate sexual assault, power, domination, and rape with gay people. Absolutely offensive. If you can't tell the difference between consensual and non-consensual sex and apply that to only one group of people, you're clearly not looking around the world, because rape and domination has been happening to women and to children, mostly by men, from the beginning of time. The problem we have most often with coercive sex has to do with men in power, not with gay people. When we move to the New Testament, there's not a whole lot there. In fact, the absence in the Gospels of any mention of homosexuality, which was clearly known, it's been in every country in all times and places, should give us a clue that Jesus wasn't that worried about it. But what we do see Jesus talking about is we do see Jesus doing some kind of gender non-conforming things in that he allows women to be themselves. One of my favorite stories is from Luke 10, where Mary of Bethany is not in the kitchen doing the womanly duties of cooking with her sister Martha, but rather she is sitting at the feet of Jesus, which is a male disciple thing to do. And when Martha is trying to get her to conform with the gender to get in the kitchen and to help her, Jesus defends Mary of Bethany. Jesus defends women over and over and over and over again. He does so and has a full-on conversation with the woman at the well, which is not something that a male Jewish rabbi having an open conversation with a Samaritan woman would ever do in polite society. But Jesus doesn't care about our ridiculous norms. And then, of course, in John, there's this gorgeous story, one of my favorite, where a bunch of religious zealots are trying to bring that sinner of a woman before Jesus so that they can have the delicious excitement about stoning her to death. and Jesus refuses to participate, and he turns their shame right back on them in a way that makes them think about what they're doing and who they are. Jesus defends people's dignity to be who they are, and he often breaks down the barriers, identities, and boundaries that keep us judging and harmful to one another. And then we move on to a couple of the references in Paul's letters and in the New Testament. And this is where people get really excited about these verses. Sometimes they've been poorly translated from the Greek to talk about how our homosexual or sodomites or something will not inherit the kingdom of God. But my friends, the word homosexual is a recent thing. It doesn't come from the Greek. So that's not in the Bible. And sodomite is not even a good word. These are translations. The original Greek word means and is closer translated with pedophile, or rather, men who buy sex from boys. That's gross. That's a non-consensual, gross thing. That's what Paul was talking about. But hey, let's say that I'm wrong about all of that. And let's say in these very few verses of an entire gigantic friggin' Bible, that all of these verses are actually against the LGBTQ community. Let's just say that. You know what? Culture changes. People learn things. There are things in the Bible that are deeply disturbing and wrong and that we would disagree with today, because it was a different culture and time. And the Bible is literally human beings writing about their encounters and understanding of God. This idea that the Bible was somehow someone going into a trance, writing it straight from God to the paper is ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. That is not the way the Bible is meant to be seen. And the final thing I want to say about that is that when Jesus is asked, what is the heart of faith? What is the most important commandment? Jesus says it's to love God with your whole being and to love your neighbor as yourself, that encapsulates all the prophets and all the scriptures. Think about that. That means that everything that faith is, everything that the Bible or any other scripture is pointing to that one truth. How we can love God more fully and how we can love our neighbor as well as love ourselves. So anything that teaches us to hate or condemn or shame our neighbor, or hate and condemn and shame ourselves, is not the will of God. Anything that divides us and pulls us apart is not coming from God, but from something else. And that should be very concerning to us. And how do you love your neighbor? Ask them. Don't be patronizing and assume that you know better just because you're a man, just because you're Christian, just because you're straight. No, ask your neighbor what it is that would make their life wonderful and better and full. And then listen. So in case you want to know a lot more about the Bible and what it says, and that's really important to you, there are really great books out there. The first one is called God and the Gay Christian by Matthew Vines, which has been a staple I've lent out to many people. As well is the book Queerfully and Wonderfully Made, Transforming the Bible and the Lives of LGBTQ Folks. And then the book Boy Erased, which is a true story and memoir of a boy whose father was a pastor in the South, and he was put through conversion therapy, which many people believed because they didn't think that gay people were born that way, and that with enough pressure and praying and whatnot, that they could pray the gay away. It doesn't work. It just causes religious trauma, my friends. And another couple books for you to look at if you're interested. These are not religious books, but they could be really helpful. There's a book called Queer Ducks, in which you have someone writing about the actual natural observance of gay and queer animals throughout the animal kingdom, meaning that biologists have been observing this for decades, and some of them have honestly missed it or just thought it was an anomaly. But there have been thousands and thousands of instances of biologists looking and seeing ducks and dolphins and whales and all sorts of animals that have partnered up with the same gender and had sexual relations with the same gender. And now they're starting to realize it's not an anomaly. Sexuality and gender is fluid and diverse in humanity as well as in the animal kingdom. And when we refuse to understand and to learn and to listen and just go like this, in the name of religion, we're not being holy, my friends. We're being childish and arrogant and ignorant, and we're not called to do that. I think it's really important for us to realize that God never commanded us to love our religion. God never commanded us to love our Bible with our whole heart. God commanded us to love our neighbor as well as to love ourselves. Now, as a pastor, I have always been open and curious to understand more stories from my gay and lesbian friends, and I'm learning more and more about it all the time. But at some point, I realized that I couldn't try to be neutral in church, because really what was happening is if I wasn't speaking out in any way, shape, or form on behalf of gay and lesbian people and so forth, that what was happening is I was catering to people who were more conservative in their views. So I was choosing the comfort over conservative people, over potential people sitting in the pews who may have great feelings of shame and fear and wondering if they're going to hell. I realized that I had to make a choice. I could either piss off some conservative people where honestly it makes no difference in their daily life what I say, or I could choose to say affirming things to kids to make sure that they felt loved and taken care of and to create a safe place for them. And so I made my choice. And here's the thing. The fruits of rejecting LGBTQ kids, of shaming them, of having all these weird anti-bathroom trans laws and stuff like that, it just creates fear and feelings of worthlessness and shame and, worst case scenario, suicide. Those are bad fruits. However, the fruits of accepting youth as they are, of listening to them and affirming their genders and sexualities, means that they just become happy, healthy people who live a productive life in society and get to be themselves. It literally hurts nobody. And the last thing I want to say is that you may hear all around you pastors vehemently holding up the Bible, red-faced, crying about the gays and the trans people and Christians and political leaders and pastors have been wrong about very many things. They have said incredibly ignorant things about all sorts of subjects. This is no different. I see it right now how political and religious leaders feel so confident to be able to speak ignorantly and arrogantly about things they actually don't know anything about. And they're often focusing on subjects that are not very important, as we can see, to what Jesus talked about. Jesus was much more concerned with healing people and with including people and with showing them that they were loved and bringing them back into community. That's who Jesus was. And somehow we've made the gospel to be about avoiding hell and sin. And the sins that we love to talk about the most are sex. And it's just so weird because it's not at all what Jesus talked about. It is possible for us to upgrade our cultural software, and it is possible and necessary for us to upgrade our religious software as well. And we do that by genuinely listening to our neighbors' stories. So I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any genuine, open-hearted comments or any well-meaning questions, please drop them below in the comments. Otherwise, I appreciate it if you like, subscribe, comment, and please share this with someone who you think might benefit from it. Until next time, bye-bye.